Hello and welcome. I'm Gauhar Raza and you are watching Eureka, a program that brings outstanding scientists on television for you. In India, small towns, villages with pathetic conditions have often given outstanding scientists. There was a family where father was surveyor. He just passed 11th class. Mother had studied up till 8th. Yet they were very sensitive about education. One day the child was asked to go to school. He did not go to school, played with his friends. And he came back and told mother that I was spending all the time with my friends. I did not go to school. He was beaten up mercilessly. That was the lesson that taught him to excel in education. Not a very good lesson, yet the value of education was primordial for the family. And this made an excellent scientist. Welcome, Dr. Sathyamurthy, to Rajya channel. We are very thankful that you gave so much of time from your very, very busy schedule. Would you like to recall some of these stories from your past when you were a child and you didn't have enough to eat at home, yet your urge to read, excel, took you to the library?
Thank you, Gauharji. It's a unique opportunity. When you gave the introduction, I could not help. I was in, my eyes were glistened. And yes, fortunately we had enough to eat. But those days, enough to eat means if you got 3 meals a day, that was quite fine. We did go through the ration time. Lal Bahadur Shastri wanted us to skip a meal a week. I think Tuesday we had to skip a meal. And we used to stand in the queue without knowing what is being supplied, because whatever was being supplied was adequate. But that never was important. That is part of life. I grew up in a village. Actually, I grew up in several villages in Tamil Nadu. The message there was very clear. If my Tauji used to say, if you don't study, you have to take care of the cattle. वो हिंदी में बोलते हैं ना कि आप
भैंस चराओगे
भैंस चराना पड़ेगा. So that kept us focused on the study. And the fact that our teachers were not great in terms of education didn't come in the way at all. It was a complete faith in the parents, complete faith in the teachers.
And elders in the larger family
Fortunately,
who influenced you repeatedly, and that was part of education.
Absolutely. My grandfather was no more when I was born, but his younger brother, he was the most educated. He had entered college, not that he got a degree, and he worked in the city of Madras. So that was kind of a benchmark for us.
In a school, you continued to experiment with chemistry. How did you shift your lab with you when you were moving from one village to another village?
Well, the experimenting came at a much later stage, class 9, 10, 11. And we were working with the very simple chemicals, whatever was available. And, like heating up, we'll take some 2 carbon rods from old batteries, put some wire and put it into the hole. I wouldn't recommend it to my son or my grandson today, but nobody bothered us. And my mother knew that I was doing something. But as long as the child was safe, they did not bother. Like once I had...
You also collected some bones and...
Yeah, see, I was so sure that I could make phosphorus at home. So I went around collecting bones, crushing them and trying to heat it up. I didn't realize at that time the temperature was not enough. I didn't realize that you need something to condense phosphorus to collect it. It's all the more difficult was you live in a certain Brahmin neighborhood.
Had you created phosphorus, it would have been very dangerous.
Well, one could see the flame. I could see from the flame that phosphorus was getting produced, but there was no way to collect it. But failure of the experiments did not matter at all. I tried to make soap at home, washed all the dirty clothes, but it was the excitement of doing something and doing something on your own. Doing experiments was much simpler those days.
But this hardship continued till you did your BSc.
I would say BSc...
You had to stay with a pujari, and he was very benevolent to offer you food, etc. Your teacher always mentored you. How do you recollect those moments?
I wish I had sufficient time to list all the people who helped me. It is true, the temple priest told me that he could give the leftover rice of the previous day and I didn't have to pay. But he also told me, people who have eaten this food have gone on to become great people. For them, Delhi was the ultimate. And somebody becoming an IAS officer or somebody was an important thing. That was sown in the mind. So I would go to the temple, pray, happy to eat the rice. And there was a classmate of mine. We studied together. I came in the top of the school and he did not pass. We studied together. And yet there was such a camaraderie. He would pay for almost anything that I needed extra. I had to go to a science exhibition, he would spend money. He would bought my ticket. We lived in a rented house. The landlord was a great man. He didn't believe in God. You know, he belonged to this party that was there in South.
Communist Party?
No. It was called the predecessor of DMK, it's called DK.
DK,
Dravida Kazhagam.
Yes.
So they
were atheists.
They were atheists. And yet he was helping us. And when I had problem in studying at home, in the top of his house, he put a bulb and asked me to sit and study. And he told my father one day, I want your son to study well, so that by looking at him, my son will study. Today, his son is studied law, and he is running a school in the name of his father. And recently, he invited me to come to the school and showed me the picture of his father. And I knelt in front of that photograph. His name was Ramamurthy Kaundar. I'm sure there are such people all over the country helping people. I remember I had to pay fees for my BSc admission. And admission card went to the village. And my mother told him that me and my father have gone to the college to pay the fees. He asked, do they have enough money? My mother said, I do not know. So he took a bus, came with the admit card and money and gave it to my father and said, go and pay the fees. And when I joined Annamalai University, where I did my BSc, MSc, from first day, my professor T. Rangarajan, he's still there, he's 89 years old. And so he put his hand on me. And from then onwards, he has been my guiding spirit, my godfather. And he insisted that I went to America for higher studies.
He gave you money for the travel, which you didn't have.
1972, he drew the drawer, took out a 10,000 rupees bundle and gave it to me and said, go buy the ticket and buy a dress, buy a suitcase, whatever you need for the journey. I just cannot forget. That's why I call him my godfather.
I'm sure these people have made the India. Those who sacrificed for the others have made and built the country. I have to take a break. Don't go anywhere. We'll come back soon. Welcome back. Professor Murthy, I wanted to know from you that in this very, very inspirational journey, when did you decide that science is your destiny? You will be doing science. You were interested in chemistry, but you wanted to do maths. And then finally, you did chemistry.
Yeah, let me put it this way. I was inspired by a maths teacher. I met him recently. He is 76, 77. And I paid my respect to him. He had just started teaching. He told me that we was the first batch to teach. But it was wonderful listening to him. And I thought I should do mathematics. But I lived it was the 60s. Physics was a romantic subject.
Yes.
Anybody who was
mother of all sciences at that time.
Anybody who was a bright kid had to read physics. I read anything that I could lay my hands on. And fortunately, we had those days a book available for 1 rupee in Tamil. It is a translation of American books. It said about particles, about the mysteries of the universe, about how particles are formed, how particles are destroyed. It was exciting to read them. So I wanted to become a physicist. I wanted to study those particles. But when I went to college, one day I told my teacher I want to do physics.
You are studying particles, so this is dream come true?
Yes,
Not in physics, but in chemistry?
See, in chemistry, atoms are the particles.
Right.
But for physicists, the protons and electrons, neutrons are the particles. So my teacher told me that, no, you study chemistry. One never questioned those days because we knew they were telling us what is good for us. So I applied for chemistry. I studied chemistry. So I told my teacher after 40 years, sir, I am doing chemistry, but I use physics and I use mathematics extensively. So wanting to do mathematics, wanting to do physics, got its expression in the physical chemistry that I do.
You got Science Talent Searcher Scholarship. It was a great scheme which was launched by the government of India at that time. It has helped many people. Could you become what you have become without that scheme? Would have been more difficult, let me rephrase, without such a scheme?
I'm glad you asked this question. The answer is no. I actually went and filled the form for BSc Mathematics in the college near my village. My maths professor was the acting principal. I went late because I had to collect money. So he had to condone my delay in submission. So he said, finally, you decide to join.
It could happen during those days. A principal could do it. Today, it can't happen.
Yeah, today also the principal could do it if he has the guts to do it today.
Yes.
In 67, they didn't worry. And he said, agreed, delay condoned. So I joined as a BSc Maths student. But then I got a telegram from NCERT saying, because by the time I had lost hope, saying that I am selected for the Science Talent Scholarship. And then I went to Annamalai University. Fortunately, because of my chemistry professor, I had applied for chemistry. And I said, I'm not going to apply because I have no money. And my mother was very upset with me. He said, you don't listen to me. You must send the application. We will see what happens. So again, on the last day, I went to the post office. Before they closed the counter, I submitted my registered letter. And this kept the door open for me a couple of months later. When I got the Science Talent Scholarship, I went to the university and I said to the professor, the head of the Department of Chemistry, sir, I have come to take admission here. I have a Science Talent Scholarship. If this scholarship was not there, my going to Annamalai University question did not arise. I could not afford to stay in the hostel. I could not afford to pay for the fees. I would go from my village by train and study in that college. My aim was to do BSc Mathematics and become a maths teacher in a school. So the Science Talent Scholarship, what you call a game changer, it changed my life. Then I came.
It changed the life of thousands of
many of them.
Children all over the country.
I can think of many people who are a couple of years senior to me, junior to me. Ram Ramaswamy of JNU, he's a well-known professor today. He was a couple of years younger to me. Samir Brahmachari, who was DGCSIR, he was I think 1 year younger to me. And he brought us together from all over the country. We are 50 of us came all over the country to attend summer schools. Today, some of them, there is one professor in JNU, Alok Bhattacharya, professor in IIT Madras, Chandrakumar. These are 3 people I can immediately, myself, 3 people I can immediately think of staying in India or coming back to India and pursuing science. And I know many cases where it
and they are the product of this scheme.
It was a wonderful scheme. People like me would not have been able to pursue science but for the Science Talent Scholarship.
I think India requires many more schemes like this all over the country, because now those classes which would never think of education today are aspiring for education.
Today, for them, the Inspire is a new avatar, you can say. The conditions are slightly different. We had to take an exam and then go for an interview. But today it is based more on the marks, and if you come on the top.
Right.
Here I must mention about my physics teacher who made me fill the form. He asked me to fill the form, I filled the form, no questions asked. Here I must say a very simple experiment. It is 50 years old, almost 50 years old. I had to do something different. I took a bottle, not my original idea. I looked up some book. I said how to make a barometer with a bottle and a balloon. So I covered the top of the bottle with a sheet of balloon, a broken balloon, tied it with twine, and then put a little straw right in the middle. The philosophy was if the outside pressure dropped, then this balloon will bulge, the needle will go down. But if the outside pressure went up, there will be a compression, the needle will go up. This was the idea. Not that I could predict anything, but the qualitative idea, which was my project, which I went and presented for my scholarship. I messed up my interview, but I thought I was not going to get selected. But later on, when the telegram came, I was so excited.
Must have been a very exciting moment in life, which you still remember. We'll have to take a break. Don't go anywhere. The discussion is still exciting. Welcome back. Professor Sathyamurthy, now your journey to science has begun and you aspire to go abroad and you get into the best of the university and then you move to Canada after United States, work with a scientist who got Nobel Prize later. Why did you come back to India?
Decision making was always simple for me. My teacher told me to go to America. He said, you must do a postdoc. So I went to Canada because it was recommended by an American professor. Then my teacher in India told me, you must come back to India. I had a job offer from Brooklyn Poly in New York. And on the same day I got the offer, I had an offer from IIT Kanpur. And here was an opportunity for me to come back to India. I wanted to go home to Annamalai University where my parents lived. But the vice chancellor of that university told me, don't come back. Stay where you are and do good science. But my professor was very clear. He said, you come back. So I went to IIT Kanpur. I have never been to Kanpur before. It was the first time I landed. And once I landed there, I fell in love with that place.
It had a very, very strong chemistry department.
Absolutely.
That faculty.
Absolutely. One of the first head of the department was Professor C.N.R. Rao, who got Bharat Ratna recently.
Right.
It has produced outstanding chemists at various levels. They occupy important positions in the country.
But it was more of a place where you did physical chemistry and experimentation. Theoretical chemistry, which was your passion, how did you work in IIT Kanpur and why did you continue with it? Why didn't you shift to...
No, I never did experiments. It was always a theory of some kind or another. One of the early versions of computer I could
As a child, you did a lot of experiments.
Yeah, but somehow, I told you, my fascination was for physics, high energy physics, theoretical physics. It's a romantic subject. So when I went to America, I wanted to do that. But chemistry department was not the place to do it. But the professor in Oklahoma State, he told me he uses classical mechanics and quantum mechanics. And he doesn't study particles, but he studied chemical reactions. That's how I started. Then he suggested that I go to work with Professor John Polanyi in Toronto. So I went to work with him without knowing that he was doing lots of experiments. He was interested in theory to support experiment. He taught me the philosophy of doing science. So I came to Kanpur, and for the rest of my life, I have done theoretical chemistry, computational chemistry, whatever you call it, modeling of chemical reactions. But the basic principles remain physics principles, physical chemistry principles.
Now, in this journey, again, of doing science and trying to crack problems, what was the fundamental question that you were asking?
I was trying to understand factors that influence rates of chemical reactions. Why some reactions take place fast, why some reactions take place slow. This was the background in which I did some important work in Toronto. And I continued this for a different type of reactions. One of the simplest reactions involved one of the simplest atoms, helium, and simplest
Very
molecule
fascinating.
thing,
I
copper.
read about it. I read in your paper. It's a fascinating area that you explored.
About almost 40 years I have been working various facets of this reaction and its related systems. A variety of other atoms are involved, molecules are involved, but the basic philosophy remains the same: to understand the forces that are responsible for a chemical reaction.
And helium and hydrogen atoms, which are the most simple ones, yet the interaction between the two is enormously complex.
Absolutely right.
And you have to read the chaos theory and then also look at order in chaos, etc., etc. Why did you leave that area and shift it to more practical area of?
I would not say that I left the area. Actually, right now I am writing a paper with a student of mine, looking at the same helium H2 plus system, looking at it from what is called a non-adiabatic process. The details are unimportant. There is important phase factor involved. So that interest continues. But during the last few years, I looked around in nature. I found something very striking. Many flowers have a five-fold symmetry. They have 5 petals.
Correct.
Some of them have 4. Some of them have 6. I want to understand why this is happening or how this is happening. Then I found out for last 50 years, 60 years, people have been working on it. Still the answer is not known. There are some families of plants for which the flowers have 5 petals. I have some vague explanations. I have some idea how flowering takes place. This is a plant science subject.
Right.
I didn't want to do plant science when my father wanted to do my biology. I was interested in mathematics. Today he would be laughing if he was alive, because I want to use my mathematics, physics, chemistry to understand the origin of symmetry in the flowers.
How simple the question is that why a flower has 5, 4, 3 petals. Anybody can ask this question, but how difficult the answer is going to be. But you also worked in the area where instead of using carbon, using other material, we could get into nanotechnology. Would you like to talk about it?
Yeah, see, about 10 to 20 years ago, fullerene was a big thing. 85 it was discovered. For about 10 years it was a hot topic. I didn't pay any attention to it. But people in the defense lab said that, can you study fullerene with some atoms inside so that you can change the properties? Then I started studying fullerene molecule with atoms or molecules inside. Then I also looked at, you can replace carbon with boron, nitrogen, other elements in the periodic table, and get similar shapes. Instead of forming a ball, you can form a tube. And if you form
forming a ball is a difficult idea.
Yeah, see, we all talk about football, but if you look at it, the very primary factor is there is a pentagon. And there are 5 hexagons. But for this pentagon, this bowl shape will not come. If you only had hexagons, you will have a sheet. Then I simply used this idea. I say most of my ideas are not original. They are always borrowed from somebody else. So what was the idea in fullerene? We borrowed for looking at boric acid clusters.
Right.
And variety of other clusters. Boron, carbon, nitrogen, we call BNC fullerenes. In BNC fullerene, we found something very interesting. By changing the composition, you can change the color. A friend of mine told me I must patent it, but I have not patented it. We published the work. I hope one day somebody would make these compounds in the lab. Mm-hmm. Then I will tell my grandson, saying, look, we predicted this.
How wonderful that day would be. Which award do you think is the most precious one?
I would say 2 in this country. One is the Young Scientist Award. I got it in 1980. I got it from the hands of Mrs. Gandhi in Banaras. We have the photograph in the house. I don't display all these photographs, but this photograph is precious. And then 10, 11 years later, I got the Bhatnagar Prize. And that time, Narasimha Rao was the Prime Minister. He couldn't come. Mr. Arjun Singh gave the prize away. And these are 2 cherished awards.
Do you remember when you were very excited when you discovered or made something?
The realizing the importance of five-fold symmetry in the ball formation was one such moment.
Would you like to give a message to younger generation?
I'm still not that old to give message to young people, but this much I can say that hard work has paid off. I come from a very humble family, not a great background, but I was guided by my teachers. And journey has been wonderful. I think as long as you believe in yourself and work hard, the rest of it follows.
Hard work is the key to success. It was wonderful talking to you. Thank you very much for giving so much of time. It's been just amazing how you think and how you have come from where you were to where you are. It has been a very, very inspirational program as far as I'm concerned. May I, on your behalf, promise our viewers that you will be ready to answer any questions if they have?
Sure.
Do write to us if you have any questions or queries. Our email address is eurekarstv@gmail.com. For this session, it's over. We'll come back with another outstanding scientist next week. Keep watching Eureka.